Come to Candlelight Inn, home of the original Chicken George and Jan Sauce. Dine in, carry out, and catering available. Located in Rock Falls and Sterling, Illinois, as well as Clinton, Iowa. Come try our original Chicken George today.
Need a roof, vinyl windows, or doors? Call R.E. Duchesne Construction. With an A-plus rating for the Better Business Bureau and servicing Will, Grundy, and Kendall counties, call R.E. Duchesne. 815-722-2821. Financing available. Find out more online at reduchene.com.
Are going to come right down to the wire. Yeah, he really likes this field. Team of the Week MVP.
I like Reich.
Since 2016, it's been my privilege to represent the people of the 63rd District. I want to continue representing you as an independent voice in Springfield.
I like Reich. We like Reich.
We're here to help you with your problems that result from an automobile accident or an injury on the job or the loss of a loved one. There's no reason you should go through this alone and guess that you're doing things right.
We deal with tragedies that affect families and individuals every day.
Come here and protect your interest. We've been doing this collectively for over 100 years. Let's put that experience to work for you.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Friday Night Drive podcast. I am Kyle Nabors along with Steve Soucie. We are live with you here on Monday, November 13th. We are here to talk about the quarterfinal weekend. Souce, it was a gorgeous weekend out there on Saturday. I went over and watched Cary Grove and Geneva play. It was awesome being on the sidelines. I know you got to see a bunch of football on Saturday as well, man.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting day just in the sense that, like, I got out of my car at Wheaton St. Francis and I was like, can I trust this? And I was very tormented on how many layers I needed because I was like, I think I'm going to be freezing in a half an hour if I'm not careful here. And I pretty much went all day with a heavier jacket on, but I could have gotten away with not wearing it, which I was like, this is really strange because I finished my day at Plunkett Park watching IC Catholic and St. Lawrence. And the last time I was at IC Catholic for a football game, there was a blizzard that had started prior to that game that I was at. So I was kind of all day long. I was like, I didn't really know like how I should handle the fact that the weather was actually quite nice the entire day.
I don't know if I've ever been to Plunkett Park and not been freezing cold. I'm usually there during the postseason, so that's part of it. But every time I'm go there, it seems to be there's no getting around it. It's going to be 15 degrees and I'm going to need some coffee or something along those lines, but not the case on Saturday. It was absolutely awesome watching Cary Grove and Geneva play. That game we'll get into, of course, got out of hand, but for the most part, Suze, a lot of good games in the quarterfinal round.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot that really kind of came down to the wire. I was kind of hoping that I would be able to get to a little bit more of the actual action on the field, but following along in that window between like 3 and 4 o'clock, there were a lot of games that kind of came down to the wire, and then doing some research after the fact with some games that I didn't actually get to see at the time, like while they were going on. There were a lot more out there that really came down to the wire inside the last minute. Some huge plays made to keep people's seasons alive. I witnessed the end of that St. Lawrence IC Catholic game that obviously inside of 20 seconds when St. Lawrence took the victory away. So there were a lot of games that and you kind of expect that at this point in the tournament, a lot of fairly evenly matched games, but certainly more games than I can remember that were kind of decided in the last minute and went one way or the other.
You can follow Souce on Twitter or X at the Souce. You can find myself on Twitter at Kyle Nabors. You can find all of Friday Night Drive's content at FN Drive on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as well. Of course, go to FridayNightDrive.com. We're with you guys live twice a week during the postseason here at 11 a.m. on Mondays and Thursdays. Mondays recapping, Thursdays getting you set for the weekend here. So we're gonna go ahead and dive in here, Souce, and we got a couple of questions. Of course, if you're watching live on YouTube, do us a favor, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. And if you're watching live on Facebook or on YouTube, you can jump into the comments and ask us a question or a comment. We'll try and get to those throughout the show today. We'll be here for about half an hour or so with you guys. Seeing here, Jesse, we need a cook says 5A all private and 6A all public. Souce, yeah, I mean, starting with the all private stuff, we got 8 Catholic League teams still in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, when you looked at 5A heading into the weekend, I kind of felt like that was something that was going to happen. Just based on the way that the bracket fell, that I thought there was a strong possibility that we would get an all CCL ESCC conference, Final Four. I haven't done the research on this yet. I don't really even think that I need to happen. I have to do this. It has to be the first time all 4 teams have represented essentially the same conference in the Final Four of a classification. And then 6A, when you're saying all public, I mean, there weren't a lot of private entrants in the 6A field. It was kind of a weird situation that broke those down. So I was thinking about this a little bit this morning, and a lot of people that don't know how the multiplier works and stuff of that nature. The teams that are still alive have now guaranteed that they are going to be multiplied in the next football enrollment period, which is down the line a little ways, but it's interesting to note because Montini has now retained their multiplier. St. Lawrence has now retained their multiplier. These are teams that were unmultiplied this year. They will remain that way next year because we're now on 2-year enrollment cycle. But when we head into 2 years from now, those schools will jump back up in classification to where we can have this argument at another date, but to where I think they more logically belong in the grand scheme of things.
Did a lot of these schools, I can't remember now, refresh my memory. Did a lot of these schools lose their multiplier because of the 2-year enrollment period and because of COVID, right?
Yeah, there was a lot less schools multiplied because for some reason that I still don't quite understand, in calculating how we multiplied teams, they counted the COVID year despite the fact that we didn't play the playoffs. And your multiplier is based on how many playoff games you win. So if you didn't advance to the semifinals in that one playoff year we were counting, you were not multiplied. So that led to a lot of schools that you're used to being, multiplied, that if they didn't reach the semifinals that year, they didn't get multiplied. So we're slowly course correcting, I guess, and getting back to the situation now where there are a few teams that slipped down, but now they'll be going back up, and there's still another year to factor towards that. But those schools are already assured that they're going to be multiplied in the next 2-year enrollment pocket.
Mark, who's a regular on the Friday Night Drive podcast, joining us live here in the postseason. I know he's a Naz fan. He says, Souce, go to Valenta Stadium in LaGrange Park on Saturday. Naz and St. Francis in that one. Souce, what do you think?
Well, I haven't decided what my course of action is going to be. I am covering a game at 4:30 in Wilmington. I've decided I want to go see Wilmington and Maroa Forsyth, but I am going to go see the first half of a game before I head down to Wilmington. So haven't decided where that's going to be. That's a contender for that particular visit.
How did you decide on Wilmington and Maroa?
It's a 4:30 game, so it will give me an opportunity to go. It's an interesting game to me. I think it's a contrast of styles, and I've wanted to see both of those teams live in action all year. But the 4:30 game gives me an opportunity to go see at least a good chunk of another game before I go there. So you got to maximize your time, Kyle.
Yeah, the Wilmington game against Seneca in the quarterfinals, absolutely wild. So let's go ahead and dive in here. We got another question popping here. Adam says, with so many great games this past weekend, which one stood out the most to you guys, Zeus? Which one?
I think you just mentioned it. That Wilmington Seneca game, I wasn't able to watch any of it, but I was on pins and needles as it developed because I had several people that were messaging me and tweeting at me and letting me know specifics of what was going on. And it was pretty funny early in the game. Wilmington missed an extra point, and they were actually down 7-6, and I had actually believed the game was 7-7. So a couple of people had corrected me on Twitter. One of them was former Wilmington kicker Jordan Saar, who actually kicked a game-winning field goal in the state championship game against Williamsville several years ago. So I was laughing about the fact that he corrected me. So I messaged him back, and told him you should have kicked it. And he just quickly responded, "I'm retired now."
That field goal that you're referencing, that Williamsville, is still one of the most wild things I've ever seen in a state championship game. What if he had like tried one or two field goals or something like that all season long, and then he goes out and boots like a 45-yard. It was not a short field goal. It was like a 45-yarder to win a state championship game. It's still one of the most insane things I've seen at the high school level.
And he didn't have that much. Wilmington's had some really good kickers in the past, but he specifically didn't have a really long track record of kicking a lot of field goals for Wilmington that season. I remember as that drive was materializing, I was actually broadcasting that game on the radio at the time. I'm like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
They seem to be settling in for a field goal chance. I wasn't even sure who their kicker was. It was an incredible development of events.
Yeah, they were taking their time moving down the field. Like, what are they doing? What's going on here? And then bam, just pounds that ball through the uprights. I guess showing how much we know, right? Jim Sauer says, I got to meet Steve after the St. Francis game on the field. Thanks for all your hard work.
I appreciate it, Jim. It was nice to meet you as well. He talked to me a little bit after the Wheaton St. Francis win over Morgan Park. It's always nice to meet somebody who's a big fan of what we're doing here, and I appreciated the kind words at the time, and thanks for dropping in today.
Yeah, absolutely. We had the week before over at Barrington, we had someone come up and say hi to us as well. Of course, if you ever see Soucie and I out on the sidelines, feel free to come up and say hi to us, so we appreciate it anytime. I'm going to go ahead now and throw the results onto the page here, Soucie. We're going to go ahead and go up to 1A and just kind of work our way down here. If anyone has a question about a specific game or class, let us know. Soucie, starting in 1A, I think for the most part, things went as planned or as expected. Camp Point Central, though, I don't think either of us were surprised by Camp Point Central winning the game. We both had Belleville Altoff favored in it. Camp Point, CPC really jumped out to a big lead early in this and never gave it up. Belleville Altoff at some point, I believe, I think they had back-to-back onside kicks that they were able to recover. That made it a little bit interesting, but for the most part, Camp Point Central controlled this game, Soucie.
Yeah, I'm going to take the L here. I mean, I readily admitted that I thought if anybody was going to beat Altoff on the south side of the bracket, it would be Camp Point Central, but I didn't think they would win. I'll be honest. I'll wear that L. There were situations throughout the regular season where I felt like Altoff was in strong position here, but Camp Point Central executed beautifully early on, a key turnover, and it seemed like 30 seconds into the game, I don't know exactly how long it took, Camp Point was already up 14-0.
Yeah.
And to their credit, they did not let Altoff breathe. They suffocated them. That game was seemingly, it was a 4-touchdown gap before you even kind of realized the game had even started. They dominated that game from the drop. And while you just said, wasn't necessarily stunned that Camp Point Central won the game, I'll admit to being stunned in the fashion that Camp Point Central did it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Camp Point Central, a very quality program. I did not see them running away with this one, though. So anything else in 1A that stood out?
I expected Hope Academy to win the game, but in the dominating fashion that they did, that was a little bit surprising to me. This morning, I saw the clip of the Eddie Jenkins touchdown run just before halftime, and it was sort of ridiculous. But that's the kind of explosive plays that Hope Academy is capable of doing. Sets up an interesting match in the semis. We'll talk about that later on, but a very impressive win for Hope. And like we mentioned last week, first time in the quarters for him. Now it's the first time in the semis.
Jesse, moving on to Class 2A, Jesse says, looking forward to the state championship game in Wilmington on Saturday. He's, of course, referencing Wilmington and Maroa Forsyth meeting in the state semifinals. Wilmington with that overtime win against Seneca. Maroa Forsyth took down Bloomington Central Catholic 35-11. And that Wilmington-Seneca game, Suze, a little intel here if you have it. Wilmington able to get some stops at the goal line multiple times. Is that what I read?
Yeah, it was. They actually fumbled the ball once inside their own 5-yard line, and were able to get a stop on that possession. And then near the end of the game, with less than 2 minutes left, Seneca actually had the ball inside the 5 again, and Wilmington turned them away, which set them up with an opportunity to get down the field far enough to get a game-tying field goal. Then got another stop in overtime, keeping Seneca out of the end zone, and then Wilmington scored on its possession to win the game. So had made some mistakes early in the game, but defensively they came up big time and time again over the last 15 minutes of that game.
First question I have, I haven't seen Seneca this year, so I can't, I don't, but like, why didn't they kick a field goal at any point to make it a two-score game?
I think, I don't necessarily know why they didn't do that beforehand, but I guess the thought process was at the end. What was at the end of that game was a field goal doesn't get you a touchdown clear when they were heading into the overtime. It would only put you up 6. So they were like, well, if they go down the field and score on us, we have to kick it off. Worst case scenario, if we don't get it in here on 4th down, they have to go the length of the field in 2 minutes. And Wilmington, despite the fact that they did it successfully, doesn't pass the football. So I think that might have been the logic that went into the decision. It did kind of cross my mind a little bit to that as well, especially considering Wilmington had kicked a 54-yard field goal in the first half. So my thought process would have been, well, they probably have a decent chance of tying this thing if they can get it into field goal range. So I think I probably would have kicked it, but it's hard to second guess not knowing all the scenarios.
On the southern side of the bracket, you had Athens 28-27. The no magic for Nashville this time. They were able to get the ball down to about the 20-yard line, or a 20-yard field goal. Chance to win that game. The Hornets not able to do it though. Athens comes away 28-27. Suze.
Yeah, that was we were talking about that a little bit. Over the weekend. That's kind of a situation that I've seen Nashville pull games out of the fire time and time again. So it's really surprising to learn that they basically had a 20-yard field goal with an opportunity to win that game at the Horn, and they missed it. But Athens resilient. It was kind of a back and forth game the whole way. It's interesting now we've got 2 teams from the Sangamo Conference in the Final Four, and they're not playing each other in the semifinals, because that's kind of where the bracket line drew. Moreau winning that regular season game against Athens, I believe, by a touchdown. So, kinds of sets up an interesting situation. I still am confused about this Shelbyville team. Like I said earlier this week, got beat pretty badly in week 9 by Nashville, but now has regrouped and beat a couple of good teams here to get to the semifinals. But I still wonder whether or not, after losing in the fashion that they did in week 9, if they have the ability to knock off Athens on the bottom half.
Outside of the Catholic League, how many times, and this might be a little different with 7A and 8A going 1-32, but I'm trying to think how many times we've had and obviously Moreau and Athens have to win, but how many times have we had conference mates meet in a state title game, do you think?
Oh, it's a very, very small number, because the geography of the smaller classifications. We haven't always been in 1 to 16,
Right.
but it's very rare that you get teams sent on the opposite sides of the bracket, especially when you go all the way back to the quadrant system. It would be almost impossible to get, teams on completely and totally different sides of the bracket. I'd have to go back to those few years when we were 1 to 32 on both sides of the bracket. Every bracket was 1 to 32, and we did have that for 2 seasons. I think that would be the one where it'd be most likely that could happen. But yeah, it's a very, very small list, to be honest with you.
All right, let's go to 3A here, where Duran Pecatonica returned the opening kickoff in that game to take the lead, and I went, "Oh, Dupec's got a little juice today. Maybe something up its sleeve for Byron." And then Byron went, "Nah, that's just not happening." 63 points. Soucie are just an absolute machine.
Well, we didn't talk about this a little bit last week, but in the second round, I had the opportunity to go see Byron play Piatone. And I did what I don't often do at games because I don't necessarily like the vantage point of doing it, but I went behind the goalpost to take a look at Byron and how they were handling the football to just see how good they were at it. And I'm usually pretty good at detecting where the football is going. I couldn't find it. I literally could not find it. So I'm sitting here going, well, if I can't find it, and my only responsibility here is to look and find where the football is, I don't have to deal with a blocker or any sort of situation, and I can't find it. How the heck is defense trying to find it? I mean, so they're so good at what they do, and they don't seem to be fazed by anything. If someone does manage to stop them, they hop right back up. They'll run the same play. They're like, well, we found out what was wrong with it. Let's go run at this one, and then they'll pop off a 40-yard run. It's ridiculous. I mean, they've now scored over 700 points in a season. They're already up to third all-time in points scored in state history. They potentially have 2 more games left, and they're only, I believe, 75 points short of the all-time record for points scored in a season. So if they win the next 2 games, I mean, averaging 38 points a game is like child's play for these guys, apparently. So, that's what I'm kind of keeping an eyeball on. But boy, it is really, really impressive. And you would think to yourself, hey, this has got to be a really experienced team overall, doesn't it? I mean, to be running this so well. Guess what their quarterback is, Kyle? He's a freshman. So I think we're just starting another generation of Byron power running machine game, I guess, because boy, that is really something special. I mean, that they do that so well. And I've watched that offense for a lot. I've watched a lot of small school football. They do it better than anyone I've ever seen.
I had a question from a friend who texted me over the weekend asking about, I'm going to derail us here for a second. Like top 5 public school programs in the state. And because we were talking about Cary Grove, and I was going through it, and I had Leno Winslow and I had Byron on there, Seuss. This is something we'll have to talk about during the offseason, but it's definitely an interesting conversation. Byron has to be on that short list of consideration, though.
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those things that I have to sit down and give a lot of thought to, but I've watched Byron for a long time, and I've watched them from a distance. They've ran through my former coverage area on a basis, quite often. I've rarely to almost never seen them lose. Wilmington has gotten them before, but I've also seen them steamroll many other teams that I've covered at the time. It's just unique and special what they've been able to build there. They have a lot of unique things about that program that I'm sure a lot of people would like to model, but they just can't duplicate.
In 4A, you got the chance to see that St. Lawrence IC Catholic game. Tell us about it.
I got there, I believe, with about 3 minutes left in the third quarter. It's interesting, and I know people in the Chicagoland area can relate. It was only 13 miles away from Plunkett Park when I pulled out of the parking lot, and it took me almost 40 minutes to get over there. And then I had to walk a country mile after finding parking in the residential area. So it took me a while. I got there just after half had started up, but it took me quite a while to actually get down to the field. But it was impressive what St. Lawrence was able to do. Now, IC Catholic had a couple of pieces that were not fully healthy available to play in the game. But regardless, St. Lawrence controlled the line of scrimmage, ran the ball effectively while I was there, took care of things, and just didn't let IC Catholic get loose with those big plays. They were banged up at the quarterback position. While I don't know how effective he was early in the game, but Dennis Mandela was hobbling around in the fourth quarter and still trying to play. So he was dinged up. KJ Parker was unavailable for them. But you play with the hand that you're dealt, and St. Lawrence, was a substantial underdog coming into the game. They did everything that they had to do. I give them a lot of credit. I can count on one hand the number of times that IC Catholic has lost at Plunkett Park, in the last decade. So it just a really, really impressive win for St. Lawrence and puts them now in a position where I think they might have an opportunity to get to a state championship game.
And they've been St. Lawrence for the better part of a decade now. It's kind of been on the come, right? Like just right where you expect them to get over the top there, and finally able to get that kind of marquee win for that program. Really, really impressive, Souce.
Yeah, and I was looking at their track record a little bit before, coming into this game after they had won, and what we were talking about before, like having multipliers, restored or taken off. They made their runs a few years ago in 6A. I mean, this is actually the first time St. Lawrence has ever been a 4A team.
Yeah.
So, for them to, kind of, I don't want to say break down, but they kind of taken a couple of steps back over the last couple of years. I'll be honest, I had no idea what to make of them coming into the year. I knew they had some pieces and, were, potentially able to maybe do some damage. Started out really well this season, had a couple of hiccups in the middle of the year. They'd been tough to read, but when push comes to shove, they've really done a nice job.
Moving right along, let's go over to Class 5A, Souce. I think probably the best place to start is that NAS game, right?
Yeah, I picked Carmel to win this game, but I really didn't have any reason. It was just kind of a gut play for me. And there was basically, it felt like all game long, that game was going to turn one way or another on one play. I saw the video clip on it. Nazareth scored the decisive touchdown on a 3rd and 15 from basically midfield where receiver got behind the defense in a strange situation, and that was the play. I mean, it looked like we had two very, very evenly matched football teams, squaring off against one another here, and it was going to break, one way or another. And up until that last minute, it looked like it was going to break Carmel's way. They managed to take that 17-14 lead, but couldn't get that last stop. And I don't know what you're going to need to do to dispatch Nazareth from a postseason. I mean, maybe some sort of elaborate exorcism problem, but you just can't get rid of these guys. I mean, obviously we've never seen a scenario like this where there's a 7-5 team now playing in the semifinal round, because it's never happened before. We've never had we've never had a 5-loss team advance to this stage of the tournament. There has been once a 5-loss team prior to this year won one game in the playoffs, but we've never seen a 7-5 team at this stage.
Jim says, please give your prediction on who will be in the 5A championship game in normal, Souce. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I go back to, and it wasn't that long ago, so we can't say, well, everything has changed. I go back to that week 9 game with Wheaton St. Francis and Nazareth, look at that score and say, I don't know how you can't favor Wheaton St. Francis to win that game. I mean, they handled them pretty well. I watched a good chunk of that, on NHFS while it was going on during the chaos that was week 9. And, when you have a quarterback like Wheaton St. Francis does, who seems to just exude confidence, he just knows how to make a play, whether it be with his feet, throwing. I mean, that's a guy that I have a hard time betting against in any situation.
You get a
Now,
good matchup of quarterbacks in this game, St. Francis.
Yeah, we sure do, and
Yeah.
that's another reason why I'm considering going to it. But it's going to be a fun game. I'm sure it will be tighter than the first meeting was. But Wheaton St. Francis, if you look at their results over the course of the season, put them in a close game, and you got to be crazy to bet against them, because over the last 6 weeks of the season, they were seemingly in a close game every single week, and every single week they won it. I mean, they've won games in the last minute. They know how to play in tight games. They don't seem to get rattled. It was kind of a sloppy game between them and Morgan Park on Saturday. A lot of penalty flags, but Wheaton St. Francis has a method and does the things that they want to do. And I lean towards Wheaton St. Francis there. I know it's a mistake to pick against Nazareth in the postseason because it never seems to work out if that's what you're going to do. And then you go to the other side. I saw the Joliet Catholic Providence game all the way back in week 2. Joliet Catholic, to be frank, dominated Providence. Providence looked completely lost on offense in that game, and I think they'll admit that. They struggled to get the ball past the midfield stripe. And while nothing has changed in the regards of, what the personnel is on both sides, I have a hard time believing that Providence won't put a much better foot forward in this game. All that being said, Joliet Catholic is my pick in the game.
We talked at length last week about Morris and the injury issues coming off that second round win. With that being said, 49-7, man, I just did not see that one coming.
I didn't either. And I mean, granted, Morris was beat up in a couple of places.
Yeah.
But and then the other thing that kind of got lost in the shuffle, and I talked to the reporter that was at the game after the fact just to confirm it. Joliet Catholic played their leading rusher, H.J. Grisby, sparingly in the game. He was a little dinged up coming in. They didn't necessarily need to push the envelope, so they didn't. And so when you consider that a guy was over 1,000 yards rushing that they didn't even need, that says another story about where Joliet Catholic is right now. Momentum, playing really strong. I'm sure they would like an opportunity to get to the state championship game. They'll play either one of them if they got there, but they certainly wouldn't mind if Wheaton St. Francis came through the top half of the bracket, considering there was a last-minute victory for Wheaton St. Francis when they played in the regular season. So a lot of intriguing possibilities for how this 5A bracket could shake out. And then the comedy of this whole situation for me a little bit is Providence being here. We got 2 15 seeds in the semifinals. Providence, I don't know how they're doing it. They're just figuring it out. So I have to be real careful to say that I think Joliet Catholic is a big favorite in this game. Providence forces turnovers. They make big plays. And I felt the same way about this game last year when we had it in the playoffs. Had a regular season matchup between Joliet Catholic and Providence where Joliet Catholic pretty much dominated that game. It wasn't necessarily all that close. We went back to the playoffs, and guess what happened? Providence put it all together, put all the little pieces of the puzzle together, and then when you were done, you were like, what just happened? So Providence has a playoff knack that cannot be denied. So that makes for an interesting game too.
He is Steve Soucie. I am Kyle Nabors. You can find all of our content, of course, at FridayNightDrive.com. We are spending a little bit more time with you here in Class 6A. These games, Seuss, Cary Grove, Geneva. Geneva comes out in that game, is driving down the field, turns it over at about the Cary Grove 20-yard line. The Trojans take over, go right down the field and score, then get a pick six, bam, it's 14-0. And after that, it just was downhill for Geneva. Cary Grove ends up with a running clock. I expected the Trojans to win this game. I did not expect it to be in this fashion whatsoever, Seuss. And coming away from that game, this is not taking anything away from Lake Zurich, but when you look at comparative scores, Cary Grove doing what they did against Geneva and Lake Zurich really struggling to get by Belvedere North, it leads me to feel like Cary Grove is a substantial favorite going into this game against Lake Zurich.
Well, the funny thing about Cary Grove this year that I have to keep reminding myself is how dangerously close this team is to have been undefeated during the regular season.
Yep.
When you think about how they lost and in the fashion that they did, I think we'd be having a different conversation at the start of this bracket if things had gone their way in those two games. You'd be talking about how strong they are as a team, with a potentially undefeated mark. They have been really, really impressive in the playoffs, like much better than I thought that they actually were. So
they look they look really good, man. Like
now, like if you asked me before the playoffs started, you would have asked me, do you think anyone, I'm not saying beat East St. Louis, do you think anyone can give East St. Louis a game? I think I would have answered before the playoffs, no, I don't think anyone in this field can. I'm ready to have that conversation now because I think Cary Grove can. I think they can give them a game. Do I think they can beat them? Not so sure about that. But do I think they can make it an interesting game and give East St. Louis some trouble if they should potentially meet? Yes, I do.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this Cary Grove and East St. Louis meet for a state championship just a couple years ago with Cary Grove pulling off an upset there. They're really playing well. They were really young. They're still kind of young, Cary Grove. Like, this is not a one-year thing for them. I mean, it's never a one-year thing for Cary Grove, but yeah, this is a really good team that's playing good football down the stretch here. On the other side there, Seuss, like I said, East St. Louis, a winner over Kankakee. Washington. Washington's playing really well. It's a team that I kind of flying under the radar, at least for me.
Yeah, I've been kind of keeping Washington in my thoughts like the entire year. I go back to, the fact that their lone loss this season was to Kankakee back in week 2. They lost that game 7-0 because they gave up a touchdown and a kickoff return. So, obviously a capable defensive team, but a whole different animal this upcoming week. But Washington has proven itself, I believe, time and time again this season, that they are a pretty strong football team. The only drawback is you didn't really know how good the Mid-Illini Conference was this year, but Washington has separated themselves from just about everybody in that league and has done a nice job in obviously getting themselves to the semifinals, trying to send out veteran coach Darryl Crouch out on the best possible finish as he can, as he's retiring at the end of the year. But now big challenge in the semifinals.
7A went pretty much as expected. Glenbard East was the one interesting thing here, I thought. They were up 28-14 in the second half, and I was like, oh, man, Glenbard East playing really well. I did not expect them to win this game. And next thing I know, I turned back, and it's 45-28 normal community. Things went sideways on Glenbard East pretty quickly, Seuss.
Well, that was my original plan on Saturday, was that I was going to try to hit multiple games in the Elmhurst, Wheaton type of area. And I actually got put into duty covering the Wheaton St. Francis game, which was fine, but I was a little bit upset about it when I saw what was going on at the Glenbard East normal community game, because that was going to be my second stop of the day. And I would have gone to see the conclusion of that game to find out what had happened, but I wasn't able to do it. But once again, this is another thing that kind of confuses me about this normal community team. I thought that they would win that game somewhat comfortably, and they really had to scrap. That score is not really indicative of how that game went. So I just kind of wanted to get a look at them. So I still don't really know what we're going to get when we stick our hand in the normal community bag.
And down in 8A, one of my favorite games of the week with Barrington, Maine South. Barrington pulling off that win 42-40. The Broncos have a knack, Seuss, of finding ways to fall behind in games and then come roaring back.
Well, we were talking about this a little bit over the weekend about how we had kind of noticed them in when we were having our live event out at Barrington in round 2. Naperville Central seemed to be on the verge of taking control of that game. And I watched 3/4 of the broadcast that was on TV. I actually didn't program my DVR far enough because it was the game that was taking forever to get concluded. So I didn't actually see the 4th quarter of that game. But once again, it looked like Maine South was a play away from maybe putting it away, and they couldn't just quite get that play. And Barrington made some huge plays in the passing game, had a huge night. It just seemed to be making a big play after a big play. Got some good special teams play. and figured out a way to squeeze out that victory. But, we'll talk about this a little bit later in the week. I don't think they're going to have the luxury of digging themselves a hole this week. So if they try that act again, I don't know if the comeback attack plan will work as well as it has in previous rounds of the playoffs for Barrington.
Yeah, Lincoln Way East against Warren just got up early in that one and ran away and hit in it. A matchup against Barrington. And then York, Edwardsville, that was another fun game where York led it. It just kind of felt like Edwardsville at all times in that game was just nipping at their heels. York ends up getting a stop late in the red zone to pull that one out, Souce.
Yeah, that was another game that I was hoping to get a peek at on Saturday afternoon and ultimately did not. I really felt like Edwardsville was in a good place heading into that game. And we've talked about this before too. That long road trip doesn't seem to bother that program. They usually come out and put their best foot forward. But, York did a really nice job of delivering some early punches. I was worried about them heading into this game, especially considering how easily Edwardsville dispatched Glenbard West in the previous round. Glenbard West handled York when they played in the regular season, kept them in check, limited them to one touchdown. So I was thinking of, matchup transitive property on that, in that game. I thought York might be in a little bit of trouble here, but they did a really nice job of trading blows and eventually being able to take control of that game. So, credit to them being able to keep their focus and doing the things that they had to do to get that win.
All right, everyone, we got to get out of here. Make sure you stick to FridayNightDrive.com all week long. We'll have a lot of coverage heading into the semifinals for you, Sue. So before we do, you got some final thoughts for us?
A quarterfinal round. This is usually one of those weeks that's probably my favorite thing to watch and take care of. Just a lot of interesting games that we have at this stage. So the quarterfinal round definitely delivered on that. There was a lot of intrigue and a lot of situations where we had to have games come down to the wire. So you can't beat that. And obviously the results set up some fascinating semifinal matchups.
All right. Thank you, everyone who joined us live this morning. If you are on YouTube or Facebook, do us a favor and give us a thumbs up. Stick to FridayNightDrive.com for all your semifinal content. We'll talk to you guys later.
Come to Candlelight Inn, home of the original Chicken George and Jan Sauce. Dine in, carry out, and catering available. Located in Rock Falls and Sterling, Illinois, as well as Clinton, Iowa. Come try our original Chicken George today.
Need a roof, vinyl windows, or doors? Call R.E. Duchesne Construction. With an A-plus rating for the Better Business Bureau and servicing Will, Grundy, and Kendall counties, call R.E. Duchesne. 815-722-2821. Financing available. Find out more online at reduchene.com.
Are going to come right down to the wire. Yeah, he really likes this field. Team of the Week MVP.
I like Reich.
I like Reich.
Since 2016, it's been my privilege to represent the people of the 63rd District. I want to continue representing you as an independent voice in Springfield.
I like Reich. We like Reich.
We're here to help you with your problems that result from an automobile accident or an injury on the job or the loss of a loved one. There's no reason you should go through this alone and guess that you're doing things right.
We deal with tragedies that affect families and individuals every day.
Come here and protect your interests. We've been doing this collectively for over 100 years. Let's put that experience to work for you.